Hi, everyone. How many of you like to eat good food? And how many of you want to know that the food that you're feeding your family is really, truly healthy? Well, my name is Jared Sorensen.
And I'm Selena Sorensen.
Welcome to this webinar, Foods That Heal, How to Find and Feed Your Family Nourishing Foods. And we're going to talk about what nourishing actually is. So we want to thank you for joining in this webinar, whether you're joining in live or watching it recorded. We welcome you. We're grateful that you would take time to be able to participate. We're grateful for the Zoom platform that allows us to be able to get a message out there to the world from where we're at in Nevada and to wherever you are. And we're also grateful for
your families, for allowing you to join us, and maybe your family's joined in too. So hello, families, and thank you for joining us.
All right.
We're thankful to our family too for letting us do this. We have some interruptions. We have 9 kids, so a little interruptions to be expected.
Yep. We'll try to limit that. But so in this class, you're gonna gain an understanding of 2 different types of agricultural systems: what we call the industrial system and the regenerative system. And we're going to talk about the outcome from each of those systems. You'll be empowered to be able to find food that really nourishes your family and not just fills the need, not just fills your belly, but actually gives you nourishment. You'll gain an understanding of where our current food industry system is and how that plays into our healthcare challenges that we're facing. We hope that it's interactive and fun.
So post your questions. We might not get to them to the end, but put them in there. We'd love to hear what you guys are concerned about and what you're wondering about.
Very good. So if we can share, if it's okay, we'll share a little bit about ourselves. I'm a lifelong rancher. We both lived on ranches, grew up on ranches. And this is a picture of our family, minus our youngest. So we have 9 children, and we own and manage a 3rd-generation ranch in northeastern Nevada. This is a picture on our ranch, and a lot of the work that we do horseback. That's a big part of the culture that we enjoy.
And that we grew up with, and we just love that our kids enjoy it as well, and that we're able to pass that on. It's in some ways kind of a dying culture, so we love to be able to pass that on to our children, hopefully grandchildren.
Yep. So I think both of us had the goal that we wanted to live on a ranch and raise our family on a ranch. And so when we got married, my parents provided that opportunity. They asked if we would like to come back and manage the ranch so that they could go and serve a series of missions. And we said, sure. I mean, that was our goal. That was our dream. It's what we wanted to do. And so we were married, and we expected to live happily ever after. We're living the dream.
Yeah, that's all I'd ever wanted. And I, as a girl, I thought maybe, I'd have to find my occupation elsewhere, unless I married into ranching or whatever. And so to be able to have that dream just kind of fall into our lap by God's grace, it was a dream come true. And we just thought, life was supposed to be happily ever after, right?
Well, it was a happy life, but there were some challenges that we faced just like right off.
Yeah, it was just kind of like hitting a wall. Depression showed up with its big ugly head, and we didn't know what it was. And it hurt a lot. And so this ideal life that we're living, and the right person that we wanted to be with the rest of our lives, we were hurting. I was hurting Jared, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And
I didn't know what was wrong with her either. I'm like, man, this isn't the girl that I married. What's going on? I felt kind of hopeless because, man, I'm supposed to be able to take care of her, provide for her needs. And she would get mad, and I would try to change, and that would make things worse. And just kind of this vicious cycle of hopeless, helpless, and not really knowing where to go or who to turn to for answers.
And so we started, we had a couple of kids, and, there were great times, and we had great memories, but it was hard. We had to face that challenge over and over again. And of course, with kids, that's more draining on the nutrition of a mom, and it pulled me down even further with each child. And so after the third one, we were kind of wondering, how is this going to go from here? And we really were searching for answers. We found some natural things that worked. We had looked at medication, but we knew from the experience that just wasn't some my family experience. That's kind of a family trait that runs in my family, was depression. So we had people to talk to, and we knew that the medication route was not going to be the way that we needed to go, especially when, we were having kids and we didn't want to, during pregnancy or nursing, be taking those medications. So we decided not to go that route. We talked to psychiatrists and did different things, but nothing was really a long-term answer.
And so we, fortunately, first of all, we were blessed to be able to diagnose, okay, this is what it is. We put skin on the dragon. It's depression that we're dealing with. So that was a tender mercy from God. And then the second was to be able to find answers through nutrition. And one of the books that Selena started out reading was Potatoes Not Prozac. And I remember there was a change there whereby she began to change her diet, and almost magically the mood began to change along with that.
So we'll tell you a little bit about what that's like in making that diet change. But, that was about 15 years ago. So we've been on this journey for a while, and one thing led to another. And we started recognizing that there were some things not okay with the way that our foods are being grown. And there was some definite room for improvement. So we started to look hard at things, and we've been on this journey of learning. Jared's been blessed to learn from a lot of mentors and agriculturists. And so as we're going through this presentation, I'm going to kind of be asking the questions maybe as if I was one of you. Maybe I'll look kind of like the ignorant person who doesn't know anything sometimes, just because he's got so much knowledge, and he has uses a lot of big words, and I want you guys to be able to understand what he's saying. I might know what he's saying because I get to hear it often, but I want to make sure you guys know what he's saying. So it's going to maybe look a little different, more like an interview. So just be patient with us, and hopefully you'll be able to learn along the journey.
Yep. So as we started on that journey of seeking for truth in one area of life about nutrition, that led to wanting to understand about animal health and husbandry, about stockmanship, about management and business, and it's been an amazing journey. We've been blessed, like Selena said, with wonderful mentors, and we've been able to attend classes and visit other people's operations who manage in the way that we are striving to manage. And so we've kind of been on this path for the last 15 years. And most recently, we've been studying specifically about soil health and the connection between soil health and human health. So that's kind of an introduction to what we're going to be sharing today. We do have 9 children. We're raising the 4th generation.
So if you've been counting in the picture, there's one missing. This picture's a couple of years old. So we're going to have to get another horse and another picture.
And so we're really focused on being stewards of the land. So during this, if you will, if you're watching this live or if you're watching it recorded, we encourage you to just focus. And I know in this age and day of little bits of information, it might be hard to sit down and focus for 45 minutes or an hour to be able to get through the information. But we promise that we will pour out the information very concisely and put our energy and 100% into this presentation. And we encourage you to do the same so that you can gain the most from it. And so we'll jump right into some additional information about where we're at. Americans are overfed and undernourished, and so we're consuming a lot of calories, but these are kind of empty calories. They fill a void, but they're not really giving us nourishment. And so we're going to use a terminology here in this presentation, and what we're going to talk about nutrient-dense foods. So right off, let's define what that means. Nutrient density means that it's rich in minerals and vitamins, and it actually will nourish the body. As we look at statistics, right? Statistics, whatever, you have to gauge them by their source, but this is just one thing that we found. So America ranks 16th, the United States ranks 16th in deaths from non-communicable diseases. So why is that? When we're such a developed nation, how come we are so far behind in some areas? And we believe there's a correlation between the food we eat and our health. I mean, we are what we eat, and if what we eat isn't healthy, then it stands to reason that we're not healthy. There's labels out there that lead to a lot of confusion. What do all these things mean? Is natural, organic, local, all these things, are they really better for you? We'll try to dispel some of the myths about that and help you to understand how to be able to find truly nourishing foods. So if we want to look at two production systems, one of them we'll call the industrial system, and the second we'll call the regenerative system. That might be a new word, but regenerative. The regenerative system will contrast with the industrial system. The industrial system makes up probably 95% of the way the food is produced now in America, and largely throughout the world too. So if we look at the industrial system, let's talk about what that looks like first. So this represents a chemical-laden single species crop. So probably they're spraying some kind of a herbicide or a pesticide on this crop to be able to control either weeds or pests. And that's a big part of the industrial agriculture system.
So I don't know if you guys have ever, let's go back for a second, have ever been like in an area where they've sprayed or are spraying. And I remember being in that location, I was just like, oh, what is that overwhelming smell? And I just had this feeling that, it wasn't like a really bad smell, but I knew that smell was not good for me to breathe in. And it was just kind of this suffocating feeling that I couldn't breathe the air. And so, it looks like water, this looks all healthy and stuff, but it really is not good for us. Just a side note.
Yep. So the industrial system is largely represented by mechanization, by machines, tillage of the soil. So that is one of the ways to be able to control weeds is through tillage, and also through a monocrop.
It's a monocrop. You're going to have to give us some definition.
A monospecies or monocrop, that means that it's a single species planted over huge amounts of acreage. And that's the way most of farming takes place. Cover crops are catching on. Cover crops are what are used to be able to add diversity to a cash crop system. But largely in the United States, it's a single species. So what are the problems with that?
Yeah, why is that a problem? The pictures all look picturesque. We drive through acres and acres and we think, oh, wow, look at this beautiful farm ground and all this growing food. This is so wonderful. Right,
and it is. It looks pretty. But I would challenge you to look in nature and to find anywhere in nature where a monocrop exists. It really doesn't. The only places it exists are where there are extreme disturbance and weeds come in first as the first responders. So a monocrop, it is very susceptible to disease. There's lack of diversity, which means that everything that you see above ground is represented below ground. So there's only one root depth that reaches one sphere within the soil to be able to cycle nutrients when you have a monocrop system.
Each of the depths of the soil have their own nutrients.
Yes, largely it's in the top 6 inches, but there are plants that tap into the subsoil to be able to mine the minerals and bring them up to the surface. And so if you look at in nature, there's going to be trees and grasses and forbs and shrubs and bushes and briars and brambles and weeds.
Isn't that really ineffective to grow a substantial amount of food that way?
You would think so, but the interesting thing is that these different species provide a symbiotic relationship, meaning a mutually beneficial relationship to each other, whereby they help to insulate from pest damage and also from weather damage. So if you look at at these large fields of just a single species crop, you think, what would happen in this crop if there was a hailstorm that came through? You know, that cash crop would be probably lost that year. But what if there was an understory of clovers or other species that could be grazed, and then you can still salvage some value from that crop?
So how does that work, like when we're growing vegetables and so forth?
So even with vegetables, it's good to be able to have some type of a clover or something. And you know from gardening that there are companion species that you like to plant next to each other because they support each other. Yeah. And so if you look at how nature does it, and we try to mimic nature doesn't have bare soil. It doesn't have single species. It doesn't do heavy tillage or chemicals.
And so why would that, how is that going to help us to not have the chemicals use?
Because it builds in resilience. So the only reason the chemicals are there are to control something that's a nuisance for the farmer. So weeds are a nuisance, right? They are there for a reason. They're there to be able to try to remedy what we've done through our mismanagement. And yet we think that we can come in and we can spray it and terminate it and grow this wonderful crop. But in the same time, there are unintended consequences, which are specifically, if you're using pesticides, it affects the microbiology in the soil. And so these tiny microbes that you can't see by the naked eye, they live in the soil, and they are what actually make the nutrients available for the plants. So when we focus just on what's above ground and on getting the most yield that we can, then that's often disregarding what's going on below the surface.
So you're saying that one is it's effective at growing a large production necessarily, but not necessarily good quality. Right.
Yeah.
So kind of like, we may get 10 peppers, to the one pepper that we could grow in a regenerative agriculture, but you're going to have to eat 10 peppers to get the nutrient value that's in one pepper in the regenerative system. Is that essentially a summary?
Right.
So the plants, when they're grown together, they help with keeping weeds at bay, keeping the pests and insects at bay. And so all of those things that we're spraying for, we could eliminate by having a multi-species of crops. And not only that, we're feeding the soil by having that multi-species. So the nutrient level in the soil is actually higher when you have that multi-species.
Sure. Yep. Well said. And so if we look at the industrial system, it's highly mechanized. It's fossil fuel intensive. You think that it's a labor savings, right? Because you can do so much with mechanization. But we'll talk more about that, how it's really, that's not even the whole picture. And then you're dependent upon all of these sides, all of these chemicals to be able to control the weeds and the pests. And so you end up with an inferior product. That whole system supports what is largely the known as the confinement animal feeding operation, or the acronym is CAFO. And so these large infrastructures are built where animals are taken out of a natural environment. They're put into an enclosed shelter, and you think, well, that's great, right? We're protecting them from the elements.
So it's effective, right? We got this one set shelter and all this food growing, and seems like it would work.
And so you have to define what the definition of work actually is, right? So it does work if you are treating it as more of a mechanized system. And the reason that it's become popularized, that these confinement animal feeding operations are popular and dominating the food supply right now, or the way that the food is actually produced, is because it can be managed. So if you have all these animals confined, it's kind of like a machine. You put in this for this amount of time and you get this in the end. And so you can predict what's going to happen. and you can mitigate some of the things that we might not be able to with weather or other things. So that sounds all fine and good, right?
Yeah, it sounds, yeah, you put in this and you get that. So what's wrong with that?
Well, so a couple of challenges with this system. When animals are in confinement and they're not moved consistently, they're not on fresh pasture, they're not out in fresh air, they're going to be breathing their own fecal particulate matter.
So like their manure.
Right. So those microscopic particles get into the air, and I've learned that the lining of our respiratory system, clear through our digestive system, is just one cell thick. So it's this just very microscopic lining. And it was created that way so that we could be interactive with our environment. We weren't created to live in a toxic environment. And so now that we are exposed to these toxins, such as these animals living in this,
so they're breathing in their manure. They're
breathing in their manure, and it's passing through that barrier and getting into their systems, and they're not able to cope with that. So that's just one of the challenges of this.
So we're taking system. All of the food that we were growing, that we're looking at those pictures, those monocultures, so that's chemically laden, that's carrying low nutrients, and we're just basically putting them into these birds to make pounds. But because their feed doesn't have a nutrient dense feed, how likely is it that the meat from these chickens are going to be very nutrient dense?
That's a good question, right? So you can get in the industrial system, it's focused on pounds and bushels and production. But it's not necessarily focused on quality, and that's the difference. There are some standard measurements for quality, but the animals are weak, they're sickly, they're susceptible to disease, and so this system is largely propped up through synthetics. Also, not only all of what the infrastructure that goes in to feed into this system, but the feed that is fed in these systems, they are largely supplemented with antibiotics to be able to keep the animals alive. And so
we're taking a product or animal that is very susceptible to disease, and the only reason that it's not disease laden is because of the antibiotics being given it. So essentially they're not very resilient. Would you call them strong?
No, absolutely not. I mean, you can't be strong when you are destroying the life that is supposed to enhance life. And so
we're taking these weak animals, and that's what we're feeding ourselves. And so we're probably not really gaining strength from that.
Right. And not to mention, the stress that is on these animals in this environment. So the chickens, they debeak them so that they don't cannibalize each other. The pigs, they're trying to remove the stress hormone gene so that you can abuse them, but they don't care about it anymore.
So now
they're not stressed.
That like genetically modified pigs?
It's not there yet, but it's more like a hybridization, I guess, is what you.
So they're breeding to not have that gene.
Right. So we're trying to prop up this whole system, which we believe is highly efficient, but we have to look at what the outcome of the system is, and also what the byproducts of the system are. So
the growers, they're not getting paid for the nutrients they're putting out. They're getting paid for the pounds.
Right. Yep. Largely that's what it is just pounds. So dairy operations are the same. Dairy cows are kept in confinement, limited to sunlight, force-fed diets that maybe
I'm going to let Jerry carry on for a second. This is one of those interruptions. Good.
So, and we've come to accept that this is the only way that food can be produced. This is what we need to do and how we need to do it, and kind of disregard what the final outcome is because we're being so productive. And that's true that American farmers are highly productive. And in the past few years, they've also been profitable as commodity prices have increased. But you have to ask, is that really sustainable? And this is kind of the icon of the industrial food system. It's a beef CAFO or feedlot, whereby, and this is the way that most of the beef is finished in the United States and even throughout much of the industrialized world. So you follow through, the calf is born, raised on its mother. At some point after weaning, the majority of those cattle will enter into a feedlot. So after it's separated from its mother. And this is a productive system in that they can be fed faster, finished cheaper. But again, you have to look at what the outcome is in the end. And so in the beef model, we're going to talk specifically about that because that's our industry. And we produce grass-fed beef, and we're going to compare and contrast the differences between grain-fed, feedlot finished beef and beef that's finished on forage.
So did you talk about like how effective this is?
Yeah, so it's pounds. It's all about pounds and time, and so that's a good thing. But what is the collateral damage? What are the things that are going on behind the scenes? So we see here again, the animals are tightly confined. They are living in their own excrement. That byproduct of this feed, the manure, is becoming more of a toxic byproduct that has to be disposed of rather than a nutrient added product. And the other big thing with feedlots versus forage is, again, they're propped up by antibiotics. And so we're seeing that much of the antibiotic use, more than half of the antibiotics consumption in the United States on an annual basis, goes to animals. And that's used to be able to treat these animals subtherapeutically, I guess you'd say. So it's not that they're actually sick, it's to keep them from getting sick because they're in an unnatural environment. Now we see a lot of antibiotic resistance in human health now, MRSA and C. diff and these things that the current antibiotics aren't able to touch. And so we're thinking that technology is going to break us out of that. We have to get bigger, stronger, meaner chemicals, antibiotics, weed sprays to be able to deal with these mutant genes that we've created.
And so it's interesting because they are mutant genes. And so why aren't we figuring that out, that they're just going to adjust and become bigger and better? And why haven't we figured that out?
We think that we can outsmart them, I think, is the bottom line. And largely, to some extent, we have been able to. But I think we're probably getting close to reaching the extent that nature will allow us.
So we think we've outsmarted them, but the depression's on the rise, and we're going to get into this, but autism and all of these
autoimmune diseases, and yes, and so we're not seeing the full cost of this system.
And it looks like well, this seems like we've got all the animals in one place, a great way to make food quickly without using up a lot of land. But is that really the case? Did you talk about that?
Well, to the extent that all of the previous pictures of the monocrops go to feed into this system.
So it really is taking up that much land.
It is taking up a lot of land. It is petroleum intensive because there's a lot of shipping of products to these CAFOs, the waste out of these CAFOs, then the product out of there, and then this whole distribution chain. And so this whole system has been built upon this. Are we going to change it? Probably not. Probably not in my lifetime, but there is an alternative, and I think we need to emphasize what that alternative is.
So some people say that you can't really, there's no way that you could produce as much food as we need to, going back to like a grass-fed model.
And that's that's a great question. Dr. Alan Williams from the Grass-Fed Exchange, he addresses that specifically, because I remember actually one day somebody made that comment and happened to be in church. If the beef industry switched to grass-fed beef, the world would starve. Well, that's true. If it switched tomorrow, it would. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the knowledge to be able to finish cattle on grass, to be able to do it effectively. The genetics aren't there. The system has been built for this industrialized model. And one of our mentors, Joel Salatin, I just listened to an interview with him today. And the question was asked, so what do we do with this infrastructure? And he just kind of offhandedly, like he says, make great miniature golf courses. Basically, we can't retrofit this system to fit a regenerative system.
So are there people successfully making this switch?
It is like with all paradigm shifts, it's a break with. It is so different that it's almost like you have to give it up to be able to make the switch. And so can you produce quality forage finished beef in a feedlot? I think that's the wrong question. You have to change the mentality and think, why feedlot? Why use that infrastructure?
So what have you done?
So what have we done? So we're going to talk about that. So this is these following pictures are pictures of our operation. We ranch in the mountains in Nevada, in northeastern Nevada. When people think of Nevada, they think of Las Vegas and desert and dry. That's not what this picture represents. This is springtime.
But it's a secret, so don't tell anybody, because we don't want California people moving in and stuff.
Yeah. But so this, these aren't internet pictures. This is pictures of our own place and of what we do. So whereas in the industrial system we have a monoculture, in this we actually have a polyculture, meaning that there's a lot of diversity.
So it looks like just sunflowers.
It looks like sunflowers, but there's an understory of grass. You can see the shrubs in the background. There's brush on the fringes. There's clovers, and so actually there's quite a bit of diversity here.
So now that these kind of look kind of close together, is that confinement?
Yeah, it is. It is. So, but what's the difference here? Are they living and sleeping in their own excrement? Do the cattle look happy? Are they content?
So do they like to be in herds?
Cattle were developed to be in herds, and I think we've kind of, through modern agriculture, we both bred that out of them and trained it out of them, but they're used to being tightly herded, and the predators used to do that in a natural system. And so we mimic that natural system by having a tight herd that moves often. And we utilize, instead of predators, we utilize electric fence, just a single strand polywire electric fence. And the cattle are moved from one piece of pasture to another. And this is during the growing season. And so they're moved, often, sometimes daily, sometimes twice a day. And the result of this is that we get fertilization from the cattle, but they're not there. And so there's not the parasite issue that you would have in a feedlot situation where they're there in it day in and day not, and they're in their own manure day and night.
So you're talking about these two production models, and in the first pictures, you were talking about the crops that were grown, and now we're kind of talking more about the animals. So, and we're talking about the regenerative system, where the cattle are being moved often and they're fertilizing the land that they're leaving. But how important are the animals to a regenerative system, like, say with just crops?
That's a great question. They're, in my opinion, in the opinion of others, right? Like, you choose who you believe. But my science says that they're essential, that you can't have a truly regenerative, even a sustainable system. Like, sustainable means to stay at the same level, right? But we've chosen a regenerative system whereby we are actually going to each year enhance the quality of the soil, so that this year it's better than last year, It's more resilient. It's
So
less
what are the
susceptible to
components
drought.
of that? Like, how are you doing that, enhancing the system versus, what the other production models?
So largely it's closing the input loop. So instead of using synthetics and fertilizers and
Which is
chemicals,
killing the life in the soil.
right? And it's costly. You have to haul it in, and so you're using petroleum. We're trying to, as much as we can, close that loop so that our fertility is created through the livestock, and then that feeds the microbes. The microbes make the minerals available to the plants. The plants are able to assimilate those, convert them into sugar and protein, which feed the animals. And it's kind of this, it's a cycle which nature has done for millennia.
So how does that affect, we hear a lot about the topsoil, and, the Dust Bowl is something that is kind of part of our history. And so what are the two, how do they compare as far as what they're doing with the topsoil?
So in a regenerative system, you're actually enhancing the topsoil. So one of the measurements of healthy soil is soil organic matter. That basically measures the life in the soil and the soil's ability to be able to retain and utilize the water that falls on it. So if you have high soil organic matter, for each 1% increase in soil organic matter, you get a 25,000 gallon per acre increased holding capacity in your soil. So it's like this huge reservoir, but yet through chemicals and tillage and overgrazing, like these animals are just a tool. They can be used for creation or destruction. If they're used right, they can actually build health in the soil and increase soil organic matter.
And what's happening with the topsoil and the production?
So it's being burned off. It's a non-renewable. While I hesitate to say it is a renewable resource, but
with the right management.
With the right management.
So, but it seems like topsoil is not just something that's going to just appear out of nowhere. So
no, what
does it take to?
It takes generations, millennia to actually, the most fertile areas in America, so the plains, they evolved over millennia of large herds of grazing animals, predators, that relationship that I just described, that cycle of life, that created the fertility that we have now. And so now, rather than having the animals involved in that, we've removed the animals from the land, and we said it's more efficient to have them in the feedlots. It's more efficient for farmers to be able to grow corn over here. We ship the corn, we ship the beef, we ship all the inputs, and this is a highly productive system. But the cost is that we're burning soil organic matter at an incredible rate through this system.
And the nutrients of our foods is very low. So we're using all kinds of supplements to replace what we're not getting from our food.
Right.
So what does that look like? So essentially the crops that are being grown are largely due to the herds that used to roam on the plains. And so what's going to happen?
It's not what's going to happen. It's what's already happening. So we saw, you mentioned the Dust Bowl, right? We saw that in the Dust Bowl. That happened during the Great Depression, but it's ongoing. The Dust Bowl hasn't stopped. We haven't seen it in that magnitude. We've adopted some practices that actually help to mitigate soil loss, but I think it's just rather than a quick death, it's a slow dying death. So
are we still going to be able to grow food?
That's a good question. Will the soil ever become completely infertile? One of the things that we see is desertification, depleting aquifers. So basically the water supply underground is being depleted. The soil organic matter in the ground is being depleted. And so, yes, we are seeing that in some areas where it's to the point that either because of lack of water, we've broken that cycle, or it's become so desertified and such a brittle environment that it no longer sustains.
So isn't that like to global warming or something? That's not really due to agriculture, is it?
Oh, you can't. How do you say what came first, right? Was it the agriculture? So if you look at the So just to mention global warming, and whatever your stand is on global warming, there is climate change, right? It's 80 degrees outside the 1st of May right now at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It's warm. The planet is warming. The oceans are warming. They're becoming more acidified. There are things that are changing. And so if you want to look at the industrial system and the role that it plays, carbon was meant to be stored in the soil, not in the air. And plants, grasses especially, do a wonderful job of being able to pull that carbon from the atmosphere, put it in the soil, and add life. That's the basis of life. Carbon is a building block for plant life and for our own life and sustainability. And so through tillage, particularly, but it can be again through overgrazing or mismanagement, that carbon is released into the atmosphere. And so that obviously is leading to changes in the climate.
So we hear a lot that, you know, the CAFOs or just beef animals in general are contributing to the problem of the carbon because of their feces. And so, but you're saying on a grass-fed regenerative model, they're actually helping with keeping the carbon.
Yes. So that's a good argument that's being used, or that is being used, and there's some validity. So if you want to paint the picture of the cow as the enemy, you have to determine which cow is it. Is it the cow that's on grass, or is it the cow that's in and supporting and is supported by this industrial system?
So if you have the animals on grass that are fertilizing the grass, that are making more grass, basically making a wonderful environment for diverse species to be able, that actually pulls the carbon from the air, you know, versus the one who's just consuming.
Right. So it's not a matter of getting rid of all the cows and the problem of global warming or climate change or desertification will go away. And I think that's something that's been researched, and something definitely for another full topic in and of itself. But to summarize, so cattle are important in the regenerative system. They're critical. You know, they have to be there. And I say cattle, I say that broadly. It could be bison, it could be sheep, ruminant animals that are seen as highly inefficient because they excrete pound for pound. Nearly 3 times as much goes out the back end as goes in the front end.
But you're saying that that's feeding the microbes, which is essentially where all our nutrients come from.
Right, as long as it's not laden with toxins.
So they actually are producing the most food for microbes than anything else, and which is how we are fed. And that's what I hear. Right.
So if you look at the industrial system, it's going to be propped up by synthetic fertilizers, which are petroleum-based. That is a non-renewable resource. Whereas in the regenerative system, this grass grows every year. The cattle come, they graze it. The cycle continues.
So you can actually increase the topsoil through this process.
Increase the topsoil, increase the soil organic matter, and increase the health of the plants.
So grass is not a monoculture.
It can be, but if you look here, you can see at least 3 different species of grass. And what you can't see is the understory of clover that's at the bottom. So that's a legume. It's a nitrogen fixing, rather than using synthetic nitrogen, which you have to truck in and pay money for. Why not harvest the 78% of the nitrogen that's in the air through a legume and get it down into the ground where the microbes can utilize it?
The clovers and things like that, they're going to harvest the nitrogen.
They're going to harvest the nitrogen. So that adds to the diversity above ground for the diet of the animal, which I don't know about you. I mean, there's a lot of foods that I like, but about the 3rd day after eating tri-tip, I'm ready for something different.
He doesn't like all my leftovers. He's had too many.
Yeah. I like diversity. Ice cream is really good. I could probably have it, but
he'll maybe take leftover ice cream every day.
But maybe not every day, 3 times a day. And cattle and all species are the same way. They thrive on diversity. And so when we look at the regenerative system, there's diversity of species that are on above the ground, and there's also diversity of species below the ground. And in a regenerative system, we're not adamantly opposed to mechanization or technology. One of the greatest technologies is the ability to be able to use a single wire electric fence and restrain hundreds of head of cattle by one little wire that they could easily break, but yet it's a system. We're not adamantly opposed to incorporating other practices such as irrigation or things. So this is a picture of a farm. It was actually an organic farm that was in its third year transitioning to organic, and this is a very diverse cover crop that was planted with warm and cool seasons. So sorghum, and then some cereal grains, and some veg, which didn't grow very good, but we wanted to try, and actually was successful. So I'm not very good at looking at the soil and being able to see if it has bacteria or fungi, but I can see earthworms. And to me, I get excited about earthworms because they are an indicator that you're doing things right. I think that farmers should perhaps take a version of the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take, which is falsely attributed to saying that above all do no harm. It doesn't actually say that, but it alludes to that fact that we shouldn't harm what we manage. And I think in farming, I shouldn't say there are individuals in farming who disregard the life of the soil. The furthest thing from their mind would be what's happening to the earthworms in the soil. They're worried about paying off their line of credit and making mortgage payments and getting yields and getting their crops in. And it's starting to become more, thanks to leaders in the regenerative industry like Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta. They're starting to be more of an understanding that these things that we can't actually maybe measure or put on our balance sheet that we present to our banker, they have more effect of our viability as a business than do the inflows and outflows of cash. And so I get excited about worms because that means that you're not using poisons and toxins and things, because they wouldn't be there if you
so
weren't.
It's an icon of the nutrient level.
Yep. So besides raising crops, we raise kids, and that's a big focus of what we do in regenerative agriculture, is to create a place where the next generation is welcome, where they have a place, that it's a viable business that they can come back to if they want to, and it's not so laden with work that it's just going to drive them away. There has to be an aspect of fun and fulfillment within it also.
And so, like our kids saying out here, if this was recently sprayed, there's no way I would be letting my kids out there. So it's if our environment is safe, and I can be like, if you eat dirt, it's probably gonna, benefit you rather than be harmful. That's what we want. We should be able to live in our environment and not feel like it's dangerous. And we love that. I love that for my kids. They can run and go, and I don't have to be worried about barrels of chemicals sitting somewhere and then getting into. Rather, it'd be something like this.
Yeah, this is pretty non-toxic, completely non-toxic. It's just gypsum. So we utilize and we remineralize our soil, and that's just one of the minerals that we add back to the soil.
So it's calcium.
It's calcium, yeah, and so you can eat it. It's very safe. We focus on enhancing the soil life, and so we do that through brewing compost tea and applying that tea directly onto the fields. And so you're taking and populating all of these wonderful beneficial microbial species, and you're spreading that out over your fields. And that, rather than killing life, this is enhancing life.
So it's always interesting. He comes home from spraying and it's kind of an interesting smell, a good smell, but not that, you remember I talked about that heavy,
toxic,
overwhelming chemical smell. It's just kind of this sweet, kind of molasses, maybe a little strong type smell that he loves feeding the microbes.
Just a simple tool to be able to test the nutrient density in the soil is a refractometer, and that tests the Brix level or the sugar level in the plants that are growing in the soil. So it's a representation, and I challenge you, if you ask whoever produces your food if they use this little instrument. And
so, you may not want to buy an instrument, but you can tell if foods have a higher sugar content in them. And we don't mean sugar as in the processed bad sugar. This is just the sugar levels in the plants, the vegetables. And so the higher the sugar level is, the higher the nutrients is. So your taste buds, if you're eating a carrot and you're just like, this is, just kind of crunchy, but kind of tasteless, maybe a little bitter, that's maybe not the most nutrient dense carrot. And of course there's different varieties and so forth, but I'm sure all of you have tried a strawberry out of a garden, or an organic strawberry versus the big red ones that are mostly green and yellow from Costco. And the difference is not even comparable, the sweetness. And so that sweetness is what's telling you this is nutrient dense.
Yep. So trust your taste buds in that. That's a really good point. Animals know what tastes good. They'll go after what's sweet first. And that's just because that means its nutrient levels are higher. So we're not adamantly opposed to mechanization. We do use some of it. So before we jump into more of the actual food section, just to summarize the regenerative system. So it is represented by a livestock component. It is represented by diversity. It's very focused on soil health. You're focused on the nutrient density, meaning the nutrient availability in the plants. And it's a system that builds upon itself and each year gets better and better, instead of a consumptive system that depletes a resource. So we're going to jump right into a topic which is somewhat controversial. Are GMOs safe? And according to this study, don't worry about it. You can feed it to your kids. You can feed it to your animals. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, follow the science, and expect specifically who pays for the scientific data. I saw this on Facebook and thought, that's interesting. Nobody's died from GMOs. Well, maybe not directly, but what is happening to health since the introduction of genetically modified organisms?
Can you make that claim? How many people are dying from all kinds of debilitating diseases, especially depression? That's one that's really close to us, and suicide rates are higher than ever. How can we say that they're not connected? We can't say that definitively. That they can't make that claim.
So back to this one again. Learned something really interesting today, that on the world today, we're producing twice as much food as we actually consume. Twice as much. And so one of the arguments for GMOs is it's necessary to feed this growing population, right? These billions of people on the earth, this explosion of human inhabitants on the earth, we have to have them to feed them. That's absolutely false. Call it out for what it is. That's a big fat lie. We're producing more food, and we have the ability to double that production. So we could be producing 4 times as much food and wasting 3/4 of it.
Or we could be eating less and getting more nutrients and feeling better if we're using that regenerative practice. So it's not very scientific for scientists to make this claim, because there's so many variables involved.
So it's not people dying from malnutrition. I absolutely see that.
So also what you're saying there about, who is benefiting from the GMOs? Is it us as the world? Is it feeding the world? That's the claim that they're making. But Or is it those who are growing all of the food, as well as the pharmaceutical companies who benefit from sick people? That's a whole nother topic, but I just want to touch on this. We think that that food is cheap, right? And so we want to keep food cheap. We want to go to the store and not spend very much. But why if there's so much waste, why are they worried about growing less? What's the real reason?
So I'm not sure I understand the question for sure. What's the reason for being concerned about increasing the food supply?
About not being able to grow as much. What's the real concern behind the big companies?
I think it's largely, again, you have to follow the money.
So they're getting paid for how much they grow, whether it's wasted or not.
Right. And
largely through subsidies. Right. So we think that food is cheap in the grocery stores, but is it really?
No, we pay the price. We pay the price for cheap food. One form of paying that price is in subsidies. So we may not pay it with our after-tax dollars, with our take-home pay, but we're supporting, subsidizing many of these crops, specifically corn, soybeans, and grains, through our tax dollars. That goes in to feed the farm bill, that goes into supply insurance and subsidies for farmers to ensure that they can continue to farm. Now, nobody wants to see a farmer go broke, but yet there's this artificial system that props up these inefficient production practices and support this whole archaic system, which shouldn't have ever existed in the first place, and probably wouldn't exist if it was left to a free market system and the government got out of it.
And so essentially the farmers, they can't really afford the fertilizers that they're putting on, or the chemicals, and the only way they can afford to put those on is because of the subsidies.
Yes. I mean, their margins right now with commodity prices are razor thin, often negative, but yet through subsidies they're able to guarantee a certain price that they can get, and so they'll continue to farm.
So we may not be paying in the grocery stores, but we're paying it in our taxes.
We're paying it in taxes. We're also paying it in our health care.
Yeah.
Right. We're as a nation, we're sick. We are malnourished. We are undernourished when it comes to nutrient-dense quality foods. And so that is reflected in our healthcare costs, which are some of the highest in the world. All right, so watermelons, no, they're not GMOs. That's just a hybrid to get seedless watermelons. There's two different types of GMOs, or at least two. The most common are the herbicide tolerant and insect tolerant. Herbicide tolerant, the most common ones are what they're called Roundup Ready crops. And that means that the crop is genetically engineered to be able to survive a dose of Roundup, which the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. Glyphosate was actually patented as an antibiotic when it first came out. And so we wonder, how come we have these unhealthy animals that we're feeding this to? And basically we're feeding them this antibiotic at a subclinical level, which is killing off the microbiology in their gut, and we'll talk about that. But so Roundup Ready is the most common herbicide tolerant. There's also other ones that are being developed now because we're finding that there's these mutated super weeds that Roundup no longer touches, and so we're having to. Again today heard the statistic: $70 per acre is being budgeted to be able to manually go in and chop weeds that herbicide no longer touches. These are in Roundup Ready crops. So nature cannot be outsmarted. It's going to win. And we're the ones that pay the price. So the soil is one that's suffering.
Years and years ago, the glyphosate level that was safe was pretty small. So why is it okay to use so much more?
Again, follow what the studies dictate, right? So that level of allowable glyphosate that is allowable within us before it becomes toxic is steadily increased. That allowable level by who would it be? The FDA, USDA, whoever those agencies are that we're supposed to trust that tell us that, it's okay for you at a certain level. But you have to wonder, if it kills something, won't it have an effect on everything that it touches? So we have the two different types, the insect resistant, or BT. That's actually where the largely corn and cotton are engineered to be able to excrete a insecticide, so it actually kills the weevils and the insects that try to attack the crop. So
if it kills them, yeah, that's
yeah,
the question. If we're eating it, are we a pest?
Well, and that's the thing that I think that we in these systems, we try to compartmentalize and divide. It's not going to affect our human health, but I really like the research that has come out, and it seems like because of the circles that I'm in every day, there is something that talks about our gut biome, and that we are made up of these billions of microbes. And so while we as a human being may be able to tolerate the glyphosate levels, the biology that makes us up and feeds us and that we depend on, they can't.
So it's affecting the health of our brain, the health of our vitality,
our gut specifically,
our fertility, everything.
Absolutely. So just one other graph here, the correlation between glyphosate and autism, and it's 1 in 42. That's a year or two old. I've actually heard the other day it's 1 in 38 of American children now have autism, and expect to be 1 in 2 in the foreseeable future. So 50% of children are projected to have autism. Isn't that crazy? When growing up, autism was very rare, and now there's this whole industry around this one disease. And so you could put in whatever disease you want to put there and chart it against the increased use. And this is looking at specifically glyphosate, the active ingredient in
GMOs.
In Roundup.
Oh.
In Roundup, which there's a correlation between the glyphosate use and GMOs, because they were evolved or created to be able to tolerate the use of glyphosate.
So the GMO plants means that you can spray more Roundup or glyphosate on them.
Right, and not kill the plant. But as we see, there are some unintended consequences. These, we can just skip through these. This is just a breakdown of some of the plants that are genetically modified. Corn and soybean lead that. So what is corn? You think corn, well, I don't eat that much corn, right? I'm rarely do I eat corn on the cob or corn. But corn's in what?
Everything.
Like
if it has fructose corn syrup in it, if it's got dextrose, if it's got any type of sweetener, it's derived from corn.
Yeah. And so more than likely, if you're drinking a high fructose soda pop, sweetened soda pop, or whatever it is, it's going to have levels of glyphosate in it. It's going to be genetically modified. Soybean, soy is an excellent source of protein, but it has to be utilized in the right manner. So soybean is huge proponent of, or genetically modified crop. This was the first one. It was actually a tomato in the early 1990s. So one of the challenges that we're facing with our current healthcare is our gut health. And there is a lot of information coming out about how to nurture our gut health. And so if you look at this, the glyphosate, so you noticed on this prior slide that wheat is not actually genetically modified currently. I'm sure they're working on it. But they utilize glyphosate or Roundup on wheat to be able to hasten the ripening process. So basically it terminates the crop, and so it all ripens at the same time. So when you line up your combines, you're not harvesting wheat that's ready and wheat that's still green. It's all going to ripen at the same time. So that's used heavily in industrial agriculture on wheat. And so we think, well, when I was young, I never heard of food allergies. Mm-hmm. But yet now it seems like you can't have anybody over for dinner without asking them, mm-hmm. Does your kid have a food allergy? And more than likely, yeah, they're gluten intolerant. This was an interesting study that was done in Mexico. The children on the left were fed more of a primitive diet. The children on the right, the same age, were fed more of a industrialized, chemicalized, GMO toxin-laden diet when they
so they're asked to draw a picture of, they describe who. And so these are the same age of kids, and
the only difference is, and they're not,
was their food.
Yes. So these children were taken from their environment in a primitive environment, the ones on the right, and they were put into the cities. So it wasn't that they were there for generations. It was just, they were probably born in the country, moved to the city, and that's the difference. And we think that, well, these things are just safe. Even rodents know the difference. They won't eat the GMO crops. And so if they know the difference, man, shouldn't we? Okay, so we're going to jump into, well, let me skip ahead. I'll do this slide first. If you want to know more about genetically modified crops, Google and watch one of Don Huber's presentations on YouTube. He's a great guy. He's a professor emeritus from Purdue University. And so future historians may well look back and write about our time, not about how many pounds of pesticide we did or did not apply, but about how willing we are to sacrifice our children and jeopardize future generations with this massive experiment we call genetic engineering that is based on false promises and flawed science just to benefit the bottom line of a commercial enterprise.
I think that kind of sums up everything that we've been saying.
Yeah. So let's just summarize. Oh, we got to go back. Okay, so summarize the current food system. This industrial food is leading to toxicity to a couple of the resources that I want to endorse because I've read all these books, and a great one is Kiss the Ground. He talks about regenerative agriculture, what it means. It's more than organic. Not all organic farms are regenerative, and not all regenerative farms are organic. Gabe Brown is one of our mentors, and he is a leader in the regenerative movement, and he's not organic. But yet, I would eat his food because I know how it's raised. This Brainmaker book, it's a great book about the correlation between gut health and brain health. And then Joel Salatin's fun to read. This isn't a book necessarily written for a how-to farming book. This is a book of kind of turning this industrial food system on its head and saying this is not the way that nature intended it. And then if you look, there's a lot of controversy about GMOs on YouTube or internet searches or whoever you choose to believe. I really like the GMOs Revealed. It's a series of videos and resources that tries to look at it objectively, right? Everything is going to be subjective based on our own biases, but I really like it because it is objective in that it tries to say both sides of the argument, and it draws the correlation between the onset of GMOs and the increase in diseases. And I think the science is there. We just don't want to realize it, and we're hiding behind these false promises that they're necessary to feed the world, that these chemicals are the way to do it, and GMOs are the silver bullet when actually they're the smoking gun.
And you talked about the Brainmaker earlier, but so all these resources are excellent, and there's read a lot and listened to a lot of books and talked to a lot of people, and so he's kind of pulled some of the ones that he felt would be the most valuable here. So if you need some resources, go look at that. So
So now I get to be the ignorant person because Selena's going to shift into human health, which is her expertise. And I'll be the one who gets to ask her the questions about her big terminology.
So I want to go back to this one for a second because I like the picture of the Kiss the Ground cover because it's got the fork and a plate there. And obviously that's where we're talking about foods because we eat. And so if you guys, one of the things that we were going to tell you here is what you can do. Well, if you want to see a change, what you need to be doing is voting with your fork. It's hard to change and it's hard to do something different in that is scary and big and that we don't have a lot of knowledge around. But if we want to make a change, we have to vote. And that's how we're going to vote is with what we're eating. So we'll jump into what this kind of looks like in animals or anything, but specifically beef. Those that are fed this high chemical laden diet, that it changes what is happening in their digestion, and that changes the way that the fat is structured. And now there's a big myth around fat, and in fact I just wrote an ebook on this, and so if you guys would like some more information about any of the stuff that we've been talking about, but especially about the foods that you eat and how you can make the switch, we've got an ebook bundle that we're putting together to help you to kind of destroy some of the myths out there and to help you get started on a healthier journey. And we would encourage you, if you want to get the ebook bundle, to email us. Jared's typing in our email here, jsranch96@gmail.com. So if you send us your email, you'll be on their list. You'll know about what we have upcoming. You'll be able to get more information. We really want to give you guys as much power and resources as you need to be able to move forward in a healthier manner. So we have to have good fats. We've been hearing a lot about omegas. And one of the misconceptions, though, is we need more omegas, but there's different types of omegas. And the grain-fed beef has an extremely high level of omega-6. And that ratio to the omega-3s is very damaging to us. And so you can see here it says grain-fed beef 14 to 20 to 1 omega-3, and that ratio is not beneficial to us. The grass-fed is 2 to 1, which is the right ratio. So what we feed the animals makes a difference. It actually changes the way that their beef, their product, the fat in them makes up. So we have to have the healthy fats. We have to have the right balance of omegas. That's what's feeding our brains. And so we don't want that imbalance.
So you're actually saying that all fat is not bad for you.
No, fat is essential. That is
essential? I mean, that's a pretty powerful word.
Yes. That's what our brains are fed by is the fats. There's essential nutrients that are only found in fats. So I'll let you read the ebook rather than give it all to you here. But we want to share with you a couple more things that you can do. So you've probably heard too that the toxicities are stored in fats from the animals. So these confined animals, they have all these toxins going in them. They're storing that in their fats. And so then we automatically label fats as bad. But really, it's just like with water. If somebody gets sick from water, we don't say that water is bad. We say that they drank bad water. And it's the same with our fats. That if the animals are being fed toxins, they store that in their fat. And so then when we eat the red meat that we're being told is so bad for us, then our body doesn't know what to do with those toxins in the fat. And so it stores it away as fat. It's not the fat that's making us fat, it's the toxins in the fat. If you have good quality protein that has fat in it with red meat, or even if you're looking at your avocados and nuts and things that are also high in fats, if they don't have toxins in them or on them, then your body's going to be able to utilize that and feed and nourish your body those essential nutrients that are only found in good fats, rather than storing it away as fat.
So I think that's an important differentiation between the good fats and the bad fats. We can't just categorize, just like we can't just say that all bacteria is bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've got to get rid of all these germs.
Yeah.
There's good and there's bad.
Yeah. So what can you do about all of this information that we've been telling you? How can you really make a difference? So
boil it down.
When we started on our journey, I quit eating sugars and white flour. So avoiding those processed foods is the first thing that I'd encourage you to do. The change you can make right now is to use honey or another natural sugar. There's coconut, palm sugar, there's sucanut, there's rapadura. These are less processed sugars. They have the minerals in them, so your body doesn't mistake it as a chemical. And when you just eat processed sugar, like white sugar or brown sugar, that goes right to your brain, and that messes with the serotonin and all of those, how you feel, those mood chemicals and hormones that we have. So need to be careful what sweeteners you're using. And if you can just make that one switch of what sweeteners you're eating, and also getting rid of white flour, because white flour does the exact same thing. It turns to sugar really quickly. And so that was the first switch I made and felt so much better really quickly. It didn't take care of all my health issues, but the depression change was immediate within 30 days. And after 30 days, I wasn't even necessarily craving sweets anymore. My taste buds almost made a switch because the chemicals are actually tricking my taste buds.
Because it's a drug, basically, right? It's
very addictive.
Yeah.
And that's why it's in everything. They're not putting it in there for your taste buds. Because if you actually, once you get your chemicals under control, and you go and you taste sugar and you taste honey definitely is sweeter and more desirable than the sugar. And so they're not putting in there for flavor. They're putting in there because they know it's addictive. And that if you get addicted to it, then you're going to come back for more.
So number one is avoid processed food, specifically white flour, white sugar.
That's the first thing that you can do.
You could include, obviously, high fructose corn syrup, anything that is artificially sweetened, even like the sweeteners in diet drinks and things like that. Are those bad for you?
Oh, definitely. If your choice is sugar or an artificial sugar, take the sugar, because the aspartame and those artificial sugars are more damaging. Don't even go there. And if you are there, I encourage you to switch as fast as you can. The Alzheimer correlation is huge when it comes to those artificial sweeteners. If you need help with this, that's part of our ebook bundle, is a Whole Foods book that I put together of how our family in the real world really makes this work with the Whole Foods diet.
So you have down here some of the other things, bioorganic. What is organic in parentheses? Why is that? I mean, can you trust the organic label? In
quotations. So that was the second thing that we started. When we first started, we didn't even really know what organic was. I just started doing more Whole Foods and stuff. And as we started to learn more, we realized that the organic was just a term that was being thrown around there. And we thought it was just kind of a marketing ploy. But really, there are strict standards out there that to be organic certified, they cannot be using certain chemicals or certain amounts of chemicals. So it may not be perfect, but it is definitely a good step to take, is to start buying organic. Lots of grocery stores have organic sections now. They didn't when I started this, and it was very hard to find organic. But now they're readily available. And it may seem like, it's too expensive, I can't do that. But I can go and buy a bunch of vegetables and make my beef stock and put together a very nourishing soup. And when I look at what that costs me versus what a bag of potato chips costs, I can't believe what a bag of potato chips costs. And it's absolutely empty and it has nothing to offer you. And it actually is, destroying. It has chemicals in it that are poisoning you. So
is that, organic, chemical-free, non-GMO, are those all synonymous? When you buy organic, you assume those things, right?
Well, look for the non-GMO label as well. Yeah.
Okay,
But
so
like in the
USDA
produce section, you know, it's you'll have your excuse me, organic section, and those mean if it's organic, it's non-GMO. But when you're buying your grains and so forth, you need to be looking for that non-GMO label.
Right, right. So organic by USDA standards, fortunately, does mean it is non-GMO. That the chemicals are not applied directly to the crop and have not been for the previous 3 years. And so there's some assurance there, but we're finding out that there's a lot of chemical drift, that chemicals can drift on the winds for 500 miles. And we all test for glyphosate. So it is in everything, but at least it's not directly applied. And I think the other reason that it's in quotations is because like Gabe Brown and others, they're not certified organic. They won't have that label, but yet they meet and oftentimes exceed the organic standards. So
it's just that there's not a label out there for the awesomeness that they're doing. And so the organic is kind of beyond organic type.
Right. So organic is more about what's not in it, but even with that, it's not a measurement of the nutrient density. There's some pretty sorry organic farmers that are trying to retrofit the industrial system, and within every industry, the dairy industry, the vegetable industry, there's still monocrops, there's still acres and acres, there's still mechanization.
But it's a step. That's a step that you can take. And we're going to give you some more steps that you can take. But first of all, with the what you're paying, if we think, oh, well, this bag of noodles is really cheap, and so how can, I get better than that? But what I've noticed is you're actually going to be satisfied on less food if it's more nutrient dense and nourishing. Then if you eat those noodles, you're going to be searching for a cookie later on, and more cookies, and then maybe a bowl of ice cream. And so the noodles may be cheap, but what else are you going to have to buy? And it just is kind of a big cycle there. So those are the top 2 that we would give you that you can do to help nourish your family. And the next one that we would encourage you is to, I wanted to point out that you can, to start getting your family to a healthier state and to get rid of the chemicals that are in your family, doing a detox, just something as simple as taking charcoal. We recently bought some charcoal, and we can put it in capsules and swallow it down. And the charcoal, it's tasteless. It's black, so kind of stain, but you can look this up. Dr. Josh Axe has an excellent article on it, but it's a very safe way to bind the chemicals in your digestive system and then eliminate them. And so that's an easy detox. But
Redmond clay, another good one to
you can also get a really good probiotic that helps. Eating yogurt or kefir, those are all things that you can do, but it probably isn't going to be enough with the diets that we have today. So you might need to get a really good probiotic. You can ask at your health food store or a chiropractor that you trust, and he'll have a good one for you as well. So some other things, you need to, it would be to buy local. I think that would be the next place that I would go. But, what is local? If they're just down the road and they're still spraying glyphosate, then obviously you wouldn't want to buy that. But you have a better chance of finding somebody regenerative that you can know is truly regenerative, and then trying to figure out what is a regenerative food in the grocery store. So getting to know your farmer or your rancher and asking them questions about what they're doing, what practices they're using, to help you understand, are they using a regenerative model, so that you can really get nutrient dense food, not chemicalized like the organic label, but actually truly nutrient dense.
So on the human health side, like that's something you study, something you're passionate about. What resources would you give to people to be able to understand, or to be able to get them started on books to read, websites that you would, besides ours?
So yeah, we have our ebooks. That my food Bible is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, and she based her diet off of Weston A. Price, who went and studied traditional cultures throughout the world who had not been civilized, meaning that they hadn't had the introduction of processed foods. So there wasn't the white sugar and the white flours. They were growing most of their foods. They were using regenerative practices, though he didn't know the term at the time. But he found some very insightful things. And these people they didn't have dentists. They didn't need dentists. Their bone structure, they hardly ever broke a bone type thing. There wasn't the depression. There wasn't the mental illnesses. There wasn't the learning disabilities. There wasn't the heart disease. And so he was like, what's going on here? He was actually a dentist, and he wanted to know why they didn't need a dentist. And so rather than convincing them they did, he found out the truth, and he shared that in his book. If you really want a lot of reading material, sorry, I'm looking for the name of it real fast.
So Dr. Weston A. Price, if you look up, there's a good chance that there may be a Weston A. Price chapter in your area, and that's a great resource to be able to plug into that culture of healthy eating. And it's not so much they're not so much saying that here's this diet, follow it, right? Here's the do's, here's the don'ts, or the program.
Well, he puts out there, what they did, and Sally Fallon kind of boils it down in the first part of her book, in Nourishing Traditions, explaining how essential the fats are, how essential the carbohydrates, all of these things that we've been told are bad, cholesterol and all those things. She explains all those myths, and then the recipes in there are like way over my head, but I do use some of them. I use the principles from them. So that's kind of a higher level one, but Potatoes Not Prozac for figuring out just to help with the depression, getting away from those foods that are messing with the chemicals in your brain. That's an excellent one. So, connect with us. We'll help you find more resources if you need.
At whatever level you're at, whether you're just beginning, or maybe you're the expert and we need to learn from you in certain areas. But please.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we would really like to do, I think, is to find those who are using regenerative practices and trying to help people get their food. We want to combine together and do that together. We deliver meat. Why can't we deliver your produce at the same time, or vice versa? We'd like to get a list of people and share that with others. Who can they go to? And I know there's some of those CSAs out there, and they're great. But we need to make sure that doesn't get pulled down into just another systemization of low quality foods.
Yeah, very good. So we hope that this has been beneficial. If you have questions, please reach out to us, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. We've done our best to be able to point out one of the challenges and the problems that we see in the industrialized food system is that it's making us sick. It's not enhancing life, it's destroying life. And we are the guinea pigs in this system. We don't believe that we need to sit back and just blindly follow along what experts tell us, because I really believe that what we don't know can hurt us. And just a brief story that I've shared is one time when I was out loading cattle, I backed up the trailer, stepped out to get around these cattle that were already in the corral, and this cow just out of nowhere just smashed into me, knocked me down and ran me over. I didn't know that she was on the fight, that she was upset. I mean, it's my fault. I didn't know, and I got hurt. And so we can't claim ignorance and think that we can go through life and expect that we can eat whatever we want and come out of this unscathed. We have to know what's in our food. We have to know how it's being produced, and we have to demand that it is produced to the levels that will actually promote life. So we are offering a 25-pound box of grass-fed beef. That's our basic package. And just what's in that package?
So there's a variety. There's roasts and steaks and ground beef and a few other things, some stew meat and so forth. All the things, favorite cuts that our family eats and loves. And if you aren't into all those cuts, we have just ground beef package as well, 25 pounds. So
yes. So it's 25 pounds. You don't have to buy a whole beef. You don't have to worry about splitting it up with your neighbors and friends or buying a big freezer to be able to fit it in.
And we actually have a subscription program. So if you wanted to ensure that you had beef for a year, but you didn't want to have to put all the money out up front and store away all that beef, you could just get on our subscription model. You'd get your 25 pounds every 3 months, and then you'd have it delivered and paid for it as you go and not have to store it.
Very good. So this product is for people who care about their health. They want to eat clean, chemical-free, healthy meat. Obviously, it's for people who are omnivores, who want to be able to consume a good quality meat product, and we cater to those people. It is nutritious and nutrient dense. And so we're offering this product as in conjunction with this webinar and the recent class that we did. And there's a promotion, and we'll type in what the website address is here so that you can hopefully copy and paste that right into your browser. And that's not it.
Sorry.
We'll send it out via email, what that website address is, so that it goes right to the page. And the promotion.
So you can go to rubymountainfoods.com, click on the purchase tab, and that'll take you to our products.
Okay, so rubymountainfoods.com, purchase tab, and then there's a promotion also. So we shop at Costco.
What do you mean there's a promotion? I'm sorry.
So there's a promotion code that they need to enter in, right, to be able to get the discount?
So, yeah, the promo code?
Yep, so we'll get to that. So if you're going to go and buy 25 pounds of beef from Costco assorted cuts, it's going to be at least $325. Our product is all natural. It's hormone, chemical-free, nutrient-dense, and we strive to raise it in a humane manner with love and nurture the Countess of the Cow, as Jill Salatin says, to honor that animal. So one of the testimonials that we have a page full of testimonials, and some of them are available on our website. So if you go to annotate, Anna says, I ordered the beef, and since getting it, I have cooked beef almost daily. This is the best beef and an excellent price. Best price I've found, in parentheses, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. The hamburger cooks up amazing, as does the steaks and roasts. I gave a couple packs of hamburger to a friend who had never had anything other than store-bought previous to this, who grilled hamburgers for the family and said they were the best burgers they had had, and they didn't shrink at all like the store-bought does. I will be ordering from you again when my freezer gets a bit lower.
So somebody asked the question. Yes, thank you, Anna. We asked the question before in the comments, why does beef taste different than what she remembers growing up? And she'd recently had some grass-fed beef, and she's like, oh, this is what the beef I had growing up. And many of us growing up, we ate, a neighbor killed a cow or whatever from their ranch, and we got some of that, or however it worked. And so all the things that we've been talking about, the nutrients level and how that changes, like the taste of a strawberry, that's the same with the beef. We're kind of used to bland meat, our chicken, our beef, our pork. And so we created all these sauces and these glazes and these spice packages, to make it flavorful. Well, people have been very surprised when they've eaten our meat, and they're like, wow, this has its own flavor. This is what beef is supposed to taste like. This is what I remember it tasting like.
Yeah, it actually has flavor. Salt and pepper and garlic is all you need to be able to cook a good steak, tri-tip, or burger.
We've had professional chefs that cook up our beef, and that's what they use, salt, pepper, garlic, same as we do at home.
Yep. So there is a limited quantity. We have a certain amount that we grass finish every year, and we have those already in the freezer. So the price that is good and through the end of May is $189. And to be able to purchase that, enter the promo code when you go to the purchase page. on rubymountainfoods.com. And the process is simple, right? It's kind of an Amazon experience where you put in your credit card. It's a secure site, and put in your shipping information. If you're located in the Wasatch Front area where our beef is processed, so between Salt Lake and Spanish Fork, basically, or actually we reach as far as Tremont and Logan to Spanish Fork.
And if you're in a location in Utah that maybe is not right in the Wasatch Front and you get orders in your area, you know, we'll deliver. And the price is a delivered price. And if we're not going to make a delivery there, we'll ship it.
Ship it second day. And so we guarantee that our animals are raised with love.
The price includes the shipping and the delivery, you know, however we end up working that out.
And we guarantee that the package will be delivered frozen and ready to go into your freezer. So I hope you look forward to eating some wonderful beef, and encourage you to jump on the website, enter the promo code, and choose the package or that you would like. So the $189 is for the assorted package, right? And the ground beef package is with the promo $140.
Yeah.
It'll figure it out. It's a 20% discount off of the price that's listed there.
So essentially it comes out to about $6 a pound on the ground beef, which is, you know, a great price for that quality of beef. But thank you guys for being on here and taking the time. And we really hope that you've learned something that you can go add value to the knowledge that you have, and to go to the next level that you need to with your health and want to. And if there's ways that we can do that to help you, and if there's something specific that you're looking for with the way you get your grass-fed beef, you know, talk to us and we can probably figure something out. So thanks for putting up with our crazy, this is our first time doing this, and you probably heard kids screaming in the background. And anyway, really appreciate you hanging out with us.
You betcha. All right, thanks everybody. And feel free to share this with others. We'll make it available, hopefully as a video, and upload it to Facebook and maybe embed it in an email so that you can share it. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks everybody. The end. Technical difficulties as we try to, you can't see the mouse, so you have to go over to stop video. No. You go down and click on mouse. On the next line. There you go. Now, we get, and